Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Just One Time by Samantha Baca, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, Abby. Here's your tall cinnamon dolce latte with no foam and grande black tea. I handed the to-go cups to the beautifully pregnant woman, who took them and smiled at her magazine-perfect-looking husband with a dazzling smile. Once they were gone, I let out the breath I had been holding and muttered, "Lucky bitch," under my breath. I had totally forgotten that Nate was still there, perched on the end of the counter, drinking his black coffee out of a ceramic mug because he insisted that it tasted better. Since he had nowhere to rush off to, he didn't need a to-go cup. "Why's she so lucky?" he asked, pulling me out of my jealous-induced daydream and back into the present. I shrugged and wiped the counter down, knowing that it was already clean, but needed the distraction from his question. "Come on, Abby, what's up?" He hopped down from the counter and set his empty coffee cup on the tray for the buster to grab on his way back. "Nothing," I lied. He raised a brow and shoved his hands into his pockets, rocking back on his heels as he waited for me to come clean. I arched mine back at him, watching the dimples in his cheeks as his grin spread across his stupidly gorgeous face. It wasn't just the emerald green eyes that drew me in, or the short dark hair that looked soft enough to run my hands through, which I had plenty of times over the years. But it was the light in his eyes and the way that he watched me that made a swarm of butterflies shoot through my stomach. Nate Wilson had been my best friend since we were 7 years old, and some mean boy on the playground stole my fruit snacks and pulled my skirt up for everyone to see my days of the week underwear. Nate had bravely stepped in and defended me, and we had been inseparable ever since. My mom always thought it was cute that we were so close and hoped that someday we would fall in love and get married. On the other hand, my dad couldn't understand why I didn't want to be friends with any of the girls in Beaumont Creek and prayed that I wouldn't end up knocked up like one of those girls on TV. I had rolled my eyes at the thought back then, but now that my biological clock was ticking loud enough for the small town of Beaumont Creek to hear, I kind of wished that maybe I had been that lucky back then after all. "Earth to Abby," he teased, leaning his forearms on the counter to look up at me. I tucked a strand of hair behind my neck and behind my ear and felt a bluish blush creeping up my neck at the thought of having a baby with Nate. I suddenly wished I hadn't cut my hair in a rash decision last week when I approached my 40th birthday. If it were the same long blonde locks that I had kept since high school, I would be able to sweep them over my shoulder and hide my embarrassment. "I swear it's nothing. It's stupid, and I didn't think you could hear me." I laughed before taking my towel and playfully hitting his arm with it. "I forgot that you were still sitting there." "I'm always here, and I hear everything." His grin spread even farther across his face. "What does she have that you don't?" I don't know," I snorted. "Everything? A gorgeous husband who obviously adores her, a baby on the way, a body that will probably bounce back to model status the second she shoots that thing out of her overly perfect vagina that won't endure any damage during delivery and will have her husband begging for another baby the second he sees it." I let the last few words fall out as I finished the longest run-on sentence I had ever heard. "You got all of that from the few minutes they were in here to order coffee?" he asked, not focusing on any of the ridiculous things I had just said. I shrugged again, knowing that it was stupid and ridiculous. "Just because she has those things doesn't mean that she's lucky." "I know," I said quietly, looking up at the Rockin' Rooster sign above the door. It was old and barely hanging on the rickety nail that my grandpa had put it up with many years ago. I knew that eventually I would need to replace it and update everything else in the cafe, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. "Is this because you just turned 40? He asked gently. I hung my head and shook it, even though we both knew it was a lie. "There's nothing wrong with getting older." He lied. "Really?" I countered with another raised brow, "because I'm pretty sure that my eggs are all shriveling up and dying inside, along with my chances of finding someone I love and want to settle down and start a family with. It's not like Beaumont Creek has many eligible bachelors my age coming to town and looking to sweep the local barista off for tired, swollen feet." "It will happen, Abby." "How do you know?" "I don't," he shrugged, "but I have faith that everything will work out the way it's supposed to." I walked out from behind the counter and over to one of the tables that looked out the window to Main Street as Nate joined me. "Do you know what my mother said after I blew out the candles on my cake?" I asked, looking at him. "What?" "She said, Be careful, dear. You wouldn't want to exert yourself trying to blow out all of those candles out. Then she paused and laughed when she said, better yet, maybe that would help land a man. His brow furrowed as he processed it. She thinks I should advertise that I'm good at blowing things, I blurted out. His face turned a sudden shade of red before he composed himself and tried to hide his laugh behind his fist. Well, are you? He asked. Nate, I gasped, looking around to make sure no one could hear him. I mean, if we're going to start advertising that, we should at least make sure it's true. I am not answering that, and shame on you for asking. I shook my head and pointed a finger at him. Can't blame me for trying, he laughed. I'm just trying to be a good best friend and get on board with Project Abby Blows. We are not calling it that, and there's no project. There is no one in this teeny tiny town that I would even consider dating, let alone have a kid with. We can always try other towns and see how they feel about Abby Blows. No, I laughed. You better stop calling it that. I don't think we should get into any more detail, he joked. People might be taken aback by that. You want to start slowly and ease them in. Are we still talking about the same thing? I laughed, because now it started to sound a bit like directions. Another blush flashed across his face, and I felt satisfied that I was able to get to him. Witty banter was our thing, but he was usually the one who could get me to shut up by embarrassing me first. So I was truly enjoying this newfound victory. The right guy is out there, Abby. You just have to be patient. Easy for you to say, I sighed. You have women practically throwing their panties at the hottest firefighter in Beaumont Creek. You don't have any problem getting dates, let alone finding a woman who wants you to put a baby in them. Hottest captain, he corrected with a wink. And there's no one I would be willing to date or put a baby in. They're all either as old as my mother or young enough to need a fake ID to get into a liquor store. Well, at least you're still hot. That's mostly because I'm running in and out of fires. You'd be hot too. The gear combined with the flames, you get the picture. Funny, I joked childishly. You still have women who want you. And you have men who want you. And yet neither of us want the ones who want us, I replied cheekily. Something flashed across Nate's face, but it was gone before I could tell what it was. So, what are your other options? He asked, changing the subject. What do you mean? For your dried up eggs. Can you freeze them until you're ready? I can, but that costs money, and I don't know that I want to wait that long to have a baby. What if I don't meet anyone till I'm 50 or 60? You're going to meet someone before then. Who knows? Can't you do that insemination thing? IVF? Yeah, exhaled heavily. I talked to my doctor about it a few weeks ago, and she gave me the name of a specialist that I can go to if I want to look into it, but I'm not going to. Why not? I leaned back against the chair and watched the children playing out the playground at the elementary school across the street. My heart ached at the thought of never having my own children. Each year that passed was a constant reminder of what I dreamed of but couldn't have. It's super expensive for one, I said sadly. Even if I could pull the money together, I don't think I would want to have a baby with a stranger that I would never know. How would I answer their questions growing up about who their daddy was? I feel like I need to know who the person is and that I would want them to be involved in our lives to watch their child grow up with me. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm sorry, Abby. Don't be. It's not your fault I haven't found the one yet. I wiped a tear away with the back of my hand as the door opened and the rooster above it let out a weak-sounding crowing. I smiled and waved at the customers, letting them have a few minutes to look over the menu before deciding. While Beaumont Creek was a super small town, we were close to Cape May, which brought several tourists through as they eventually made their way to Ocean City, New Jersey. I better get up there, I said, pulling my hand away before standing up and pushing the chair back under the table. All right, well, I'm heading to town to run some errands. Do you need anything? Nothing that you can buy, I laughed. Try to cheer up, Abby. It'll all work out. You'll see. He gave me his award-winning smile and then headed out the door.